Hi folks, Dave Waring here again from fitsmallbusiness.com and today's lesson of the day. In our last video, we continued our series on how to start a successful business with a look at how to get a great business card on any budget. In today's video, we're going to continue that series with a look at how to go about leasing space for your new business. So let's get started. Should you work with a broker? The commercial real estate market is much less standardized than the residential real estate market. In fact, just being able to find what spaces are currently available is difficult in the commercial market. There are also many nuances involved in renting commercial property, like zoning restrictions, that an experienced broker can help you navigate. When you also consider the fact that the landlord is normally the one that pays the broker's commission, there is really no reason not to work with a broker when leasing commercial real estate. When choosing a commercial real estate broker, you want to work with a tenant broker. In contrast to leasing agents who represent the landlord, tenant brokers specialize in showing property to potential lessees. Generally, tenant brokers will want you to sign a representation agreement, giving them the exclusive right to show you property. If you are renting a smaller space, then you will likely want to sign the representation agreement, as this will further incentivize the broker to put time into finding you the right space. If you are leasing a large space, where the commission will be very sizable for the broker, then you may want to keep your options open. If you happen to be in a very small town where there are no commercial real estate brokers, then there is another way. In this case, use the public tax records to find out who owns the building and then contact them directly. I've included a link with instructions on how to go about that in the resources link below this video. Here are some other things to keep in mind when working with a commercial real estate broker. Commercial real estate brokers are paid a percentage of the lease amount, so they have an incentive to lease you the most expensive space possible. They have no incentive to point things out in your lease, which you should negotiate, or which may be problematic. Generally, the less the total cost of a lease, the less attention you can expect from the broker. With this in mind, you may also want to consider working with a real estate attorney who can help you navigate the lease and point out potential issues. Where do you find a commercial real estate broker? If you're working with a real estate attorney to help you negotiate your lease, then he or she should know many brokers that can assist you. If not, then asking for a referral from people you know who have rented commercial space in the past and were happy with the results is the next best place to start. I have also included a list of some of the largest commercial real estate firms in the resources link below this video. Next, let's talk about how to navigate the commercial real estate lease. In most cases, the first copy of the lease that you receive will be completely skewed in favor of the landlord. They do this in the hopes that, like many of their other tenants, you would just sign the lease without really understanding it. However, it is important to know that commercial leases are not standardized, and many of the clauses in the lease can be negotiated so they are fair to both the landlord and the tenant. In most cases, you're going to have to sign a personal guarantee when renting commercial real estate. This means that if the business is not able to pay the rent, then you are personally liable. This also means that your landlord will likely want to run a check on your personal finances to make sure you have the capability to back up the lease. One thing to note here is that most landlords are simply asking you to establish a track record, so having a personal guarantee expire after a set period of time, say after 2 or 3 years on a 5-year lease, should be easy to negotiate. In most markets, commercial real estate is quoted either by the year or month and on a per square foot basis. Keep in mind, however, that the space which you actually use for your office, called usable square footage, and the square footage that you are charged for are often different. The reason why is that you're charged based on your usable square footage and your share of the common space which is in the building. For this reason, it is important to measure your space. I've included a link in the resources link below this video with more detail on this point. Here's an overview of the different types of leases. The percentage lease. The percentage lease is common with retail spaces. You pay a base rent plus a percentage of sales. I've included an article on how this is calculated in the resources link below this video. The net lease. In addition to the price per square foot, with a net lease, you also pay for some or all of the other expenses associated with running the property. In a double net lease, this would include taxes and insurance. In a triple net lease, this would include taxes, insurance, and maintenance. These are sometimes also referred to as common area maintenance or CAM fees. This is one of the most common areas where tenants run into trouble. With this in mind, you should have a full understanding of all CAM fees and negotiate for caps on how much they can be increased each year before signing your lease. I've included an article on how to avoid CAM fee surprises in the resources link below this video. The gross lease. With gross leases, all fees are accounted for in the per square foot price quote. Here's an overview of the things you should negotiate with your commercial lease. The length of the lease. The best case scenario for you as the tenant is a short-term lease with multiple options to renew after the lease is up. This way, if you go out of business or outgrow your space, you are not stuck with the lease. You also avoid losing the space if it continues to serve your needs well. However, generally longer-term leases are more favorable to the landlord, so the longer the lease, the better the negotiating position you are in for other parts of the contract. With this in mind, commercial leases are generally longer than residential leases, and leases with terms of 5 or even 10 years are not uncommon in the commercial real estate space. How rent increases are handled. Landlords would generally try and work into the lease an annual increase in the rent based on the Consumer Price Index or some other measure. These are also called escalations and should be fully understood before entering into any lease. I've included an article in the resources link below this video with more on escalations. Find out who is responsible for what expenses. With most residential leases, the landlord is responsible for the maintenance of the property and fixing things like AC units and other appliances. This is not always the case with commercial property, so make sure the lease clarifies who is responsible for what expenses. Building out the space. If you need to make alterations to the space, then you want to make sure it is clearly outlined in the lease what alterations you are allowed to make and who is responsible for paying them. With longer-term leases, it is not uncommon for the landlord to cover the cost of building out the space. Also keep in mind that if you're not going to be able to use the space until it is built out, you don't want to be paying full rent during that time. Signage. If your business needs a sign for customers, then make sure you understand what is allowed and what isn't. The sublease clause. Whenever possible, you want to have the ability to sublease your space. This offers some protection if you are no longer able to pay the rent, or if you've expanded to the point where you need to move into a larger space. The exit plan clause. What happens if you want to break your lease before it's over? Whenever possible, you want to negotiate favorable early termination fees, like a 2 or 3 month penalty. Assignability. If you sell your business, then you're going to need to assign the lease to a new owner. Some leases do not allow this. A co-tenancy clause. If your business depends on the foot traffic that another nearby business brings into an area, then you should consider adding a co-tenancy clause which allows you to break your lease if that anchor tenant leaves. This is especially important for things like small shopping malls, which have 1 or 2 very large stores that are responsible for a large portion of the mall's customers. An exclusive use clause. If your business depends on foot traffic, then you may want to try and negotiate an exclusive use clause into the contract, which prevents the landlord from renting space out to one of your competitors. The security deposit. There are no limits or standards as to how much a commercial landlord can require for a security deposit. I've included an article with some great tips on how to negotiate your security deposit in the resources link below this video. The start date of the lease. You want to make sure you're up and running and able to meet all the obligations of the lease before the start date. This means that the start date may need to be different from the date you sign the lease. If you're negotiating a long-term lease for a retail store or other type of business where the holidays make up the majority of your sales, then you want to make sure you fit as many holiday periods into your lease as possible. That's our video for today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Also be sure to stay tuned for the next video in our How to Start a Successful Business series, where we discuss how to find the perfect location for your business. For more great advice on how to become a successful entrepreneur, be sure to visit us at fitsmallbusiness.com today. Thanks for watching.